Dear boys and girls, today's topic of discussion is a relative clause in the restrictive sense and in the continuative sense. We have already heard about relative clause or adjective clause, but this adjective clause or relative clause can be used in two different ways. When we say relative clause in the restrictive sense, you will get the antecedent just before the relative pronoun. Okay? As for example, number 1, I planted an oak tree which is now a full-grown tree. Or you may say, on my 15th birthday, my grandmother planted an oak tree which is now a full-grown tree. On my 15th birthday, my grandmother planted an oak tree is the principal clause, which is now a full-grown tree, is subordinate adjective clause or relative clause, and qualifying the noun oak tree. Clear? Oak tree is an antecedent. Number 2, for example, the boy with a blue hat on his head is my nephew. The boy with a blue hat on his head is my nephew. So here the principal clause is, the boy is my nephew. It is principal clause. Who is with a blue hat on his head is subordinate adjective clause or relative clause, and qualifying the noun is the boy. Boy is the antecedent. So when we say relative clause or adjective clause in the restrictive sense, you see that the antecedent is just before the relative pronoun. Okay? Another example. Don't throw the stones at the frogs which are croaking in the bushes. So don't throw stones at the frogs, principal clause, which are croaking in the bushes, is an example of subordinate adjective clause or relative clause qualifying the noun frogs. So frogs is an antecedent. Clear? So antecedent is explicit in the case of relative clause in the restrictive sense. Mind it. The boy whom you see at a distance is my brother. The boy whom you see at a distance is my brother. So the boy is my brother is principal clause. Whom you see at a distance, subordinate adjective clause or relative clause, and qualifying the noun the boy. Okay? The doctor with a stethoscope in his hand, who is entering the ward, is my uncle. So the doctor is my uncle, principal clause. who is entering the world with a stethoscope in his hand, it is subordinate adjective clause or relative clause qualifying the noun doctor. Clear? Now there is a question of relative clause in the continuative sense. Okay? This construction is very difficult because this subordinate clause, that is the adjective clause or relative clause, qualifies not a single antecedent. It qualifies the entire principal clause. Please remember it. For example, I am giving you an example. The Prime Minister of India has delivered a lecture on the miseries and sufferings of the agricultural people, which has left a deep impact on the minds of the commoners. So, which has left a deep impact on the commoners is an adjective clause or a relative clause, but it has qualified the entire principal clause. The Prime Minister of India has delivered a lecture on the miseries and sufferings of the agricultural laborers, etc. So, entire principal clause is qualified by the relative clause or the adjective clause, and this is called the relative clause in the continuative sense. Clear? Another example I am giving you. For example, nowadays the agriculturists or the farmers are using fertilizers, insecticides, etc. in a large scale, which has left a deep harmful effect on human body, or which has left a harmful effect or impact on human body. Nowadays, the farmers or the agriculturists are using insecticide, fertilizer, etc. in a massive scale or a large scale is a principal clause, which has left a harmful impact or harmful effect on a human body is subordinate adjective clause or relative clause. And this subordinate adjective clause or relative clause is being qualified, it qualifies the entire principal clause, because in the principal clause you cannot find out or cannot discover a particular incident. Clear? The trees and plants, number 3, the trees and plants exhale oxygen, absorbing the pollutants in the air. That has a clear impact on human health. That here means which? That has a clear impact on human health is the subordinate adjective clause or relative clause, which qualifies the entire principal clause. Clear? So, this is the difference between relative clause in the restrictive sense and the relative clause in the continuative sense. Dear boys and girls, and those who are preparing themselves for the competitive exams, try to follow my video and please subscribe. Please subscribe and give many subscriptions. Please, I request you, so that I may come before you with many grammatical items to clear your doubts. Okay, thank you. Good night.